This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
Welcome back to Confronting the Line, where we talk about the world of personal development and transformation, and sometimes how that kind of can mess with people and ways that people can really work to extricate themselves from high control groups, all that stuff. That's all the topics we always talk about here on Confronting the Line. My name is Mark DeFoya. I'm here with our host, Ann L. Peterson. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Mark.
We are back with our guest, Chris Shelton, when we had a lively discussion in our last episode, all about like the similarities we saw between Scientology and Landmark and all sorts of groups that have been known to be somewhat coercive at times. You know, many people will still swear by them, by all the great stuff they got out of it, but we're talking about kind of like the not so great stuff, the stuff that maybe didn't quite work out so well. As you know, if you saw our first episode with Chris, he gave us his history, really essentially growing up within Scientology, and in fact, even the Sea Org, and then subsequent break from that and the work that he does to deconstruct and to support people who are deconstructing their participation in such groups. So we're going to continue our conversation now. If you have not seen that first part, what are you doing here? Go back to that first part and listen to that first so it makes sense. We're going to continue our conversation, and we're really going to get into this notion of weaponized empathy. And we're going to start by just defining that. What does that mean? And, you know, kind of how can we be mindful and aware of it? So let's start there.
I want to layer in one thing. I believe, Chris, you went and got one of the first degrees available on coercive control. Didn't you go get on our audience to know that? Like this is a serious nerd on this stuff talking, who has really studied this stuff. I'm a acolyte here at learning at Chris's knee, but the whole, can you just say a little bit what that official degree was and what that was about? Because I think that's fascinating that we're trying to really educate ourselves about these phenomena.
Big time. Absolutely. And the UK is really leading the way on this. They've actually got laws on the books about coercive control in domestic violence situations, intimate partner violence, which is a start. We need it.
Yes.
The same kind of dynamics that happen in cults anyway, right? It's the same kind of thing. And the degree that I went and studied at Salford University was on the psychology of coercive control. And so it really breaks it down as to what are the dynamics of it. How does it work? How does it work in this context with gangs, with cults, with trafficking, with intimate partner violence? It's very, very similar across those domains. And that's what I studied.
I'm so glad to know there's a program like that and people like you studying that and whatnot, because it's so relevant in so many areas of our life today. And, you know, the number one question, and I don't know if you got this, but I certainly get it, is, well, then why'd you stay? If they were so abusive, if they were so exploitive, which in my answer, I didn't really even know about that until after my book came out, like nowhere near the degree. I mean, my story is laid out in my book, and I was, you know, sort of maybe willfully innocent. I don't know. We'll talk about that. But yeah, that, you know, why people stay in these groups. So to start, so I think that's probably a good lead in. So tell us, I got interested in this weaponized empaths thing because you asked it when I first met you and I did my interview with you on your show, which I enjoyed very much. And it's featured on my website, actually. So it's still one of my favorite conversations.
We'll link to it here in the show notes.
We will.
It's nice to get the background. Yeah.
Yeah. But you at the very end, you brought up kind of this idea, like, what did I think about the kinds of people that get involved with organizations like Scientology, NXIVM, Landmark? Those are the obvious ones. But I think it's true for a lot of kinds of any kind of organization that starts to exert control over its members and get them to act and do things, not just on behalf of the organization, but also what makes it destructive is the things that they get them to act and do out are counterproductive to the individual's own wellness. So, you know, in Landmark's case, it was hundreds and hundreds of hours. You know, I shut down a successful business to go on staff and make peanuts. I really wish I had that business right now, by the way, but, you know, things like that. So you were asking me what I think about that, and we kind of came to the conclusion, in our conversation, that there's really two kinds of people that get deeply involved in these kinds of groups and organizations. One is predators, that there is a home there for perpetrators or predators. There's some conversation about, do these kinds of groups actually foster that or make or create predators? I don't know that I would go that far with Landmark, but I would say that Landmark's kind of everybody deserves a chance. Nobody's bad. It's all a story and what you're making it mean. Culture does create a safe harbor for predators from time to time. And I have a handful of lawsuits that were fallout of that very phenomenon. So when I say that, I don't say that lightly. I say that out of hearing a lot of stories now and finding a lot of evidence actually of predators. And I have a few of my own personal stories where predators were housed. Now, when their behavior got too egregious, they were kicked out, thank goodness, in my own personal case over a sexual assault incident. But so there's that. But the overwhelming other side you mentioned to me was this idea of weaponized empaths. So I'm going to start right there. So tell me what you mean, because I know you've continued to explore this and study it, so have I. And so tell us what you mean by weaponized empath and what you're learning about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a pretty simple idea. And to be clear, I don't mean to imply or say that every single person who's in a cult is either a weaponized empath or a predator. There's a full spectrum of people who are involved in cults, because if you can be lied to, you can be deceived, you can be drawn into a cult situation. And that's true for any human being. But weaponized empaths are the power ones. These are the guys who go to the mat for the cults. These are the guys who end up in the inner circle of the cult leader. Predators sometimes make their way all the way up to the top as well. But the weaponized empaths are people who are the true believers. These are the people who go all in on the group. And it's not, the level of belief is not necessarily the marker here. It's the empathy. It's the twist and correction of the empath. Empathetic people, or empaths, as people refer to them. It's not like a formal diagnostic, term, right? It's got a lot of different definitions we can throw around with it, and a lot of different concepts connected to it. So we don't have to, walk a very thin line of what is an empath. It's a person who cares about other people. It's a person who neurologically, has active mirror neurons, they're called, right? Where you're connecting with other people by duplicating or mirroring them, or kind of getting where their head is at, kind of thing. And we kind of can relate to this in one way or another, especially if we are empaths ourselves, where our relationships and our navigation of life is about getting where other people are at, where we want to understand other people and help them and assist them and and care about them. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. Now the shock to most of us empaths is that the whole world isn't like this, because we tend to project ourselves onto other people, and a great many people in the cult world and in the ex-cult world, therefore, are empathetic people. That's part of the draw of why they joined in the first place, especially those of us who were staff, who signed on and wanted to really help,
right?
Really push this thing forward.
People who became program leaders.
Yeah, this is the thing that's going to change the world, right? And we are people who want other people to be happy, because when we feel happy, when we feel pleasure, when we feel good, we enjoy sharing it with other people. Again, not everybody's like this. Predatory people are the opposite of this, right? They get great joy and satisfaction in hurting other people. So it's sort of the opposite of this. And there are various models of this. There's your sort of apath, empath, sociopath model, right? That's this dark triad, and various models have been put together of this. But again, I think we can just talk about it in simplicity. So what I talk about with weaponized empaths is, and there's a few different, if you Google this, you'll find a few different interpretations of this term, different ways people talk about it, different ideas they have of it. Here's mine. You're gonna take a person who's empathetic and you're gonna recruit them into the cult, and you're going to change their morality by instilling the value system of the group on the person, which is what every cult does. You change their concepts of what's good and bad and right and wrong. And this is not complicated. It's a good thing to get landmark to everybody. Well, you didn't always have that point of view. That wasn't how you thought of good and bad and right and wrong before you got into landmark. You didn't judge whether somebody was doing a good thing or not if they, based on Werner. But after you adopt this belief system, just like I did with Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard's system, you change how you judge people, how you look at people, how you estimate whether they're good or bad people based on how much they align to these new values of the cult.
Well, I think it's even a little more insidious. Anyway, go ahead and I'll jump in, finish that thought.
Okay. So this is pretty insidious.
It's getting even worse.
Hold on.
Because we're talking very low level stuff. I mean, if you're changing or modifying people's concepts of what's good and bad or right and wrong, this is the fundamental to how people behave, how they make their judgments or decisions about things. So after being in Scientology for a relatively short period of time, of course, I was raised in it too, so I was primed for this. You start thinking about things like, what would Ron do, right? You start thinking about things through the filter of the cult leader and the cult leader's approval and the rules of the group and things like that. And so it becomes an absolute imperative and priority for an empath as a cult member to spread the good word, to get it out there, to try to get more people on board. They get really super hyper enthusiastic about it. A more selfish person can become hyper enthusiastic about it, but their actions and what they do with it is all self-centered. It's all coming back to me. They pay their money, they do their auditing, they do their seminars, but they're not here to help other people. They're here for them, right? But we weren't. We were there to help other people too, right? In fact, we thought that was how we would help ourselves.
Yes.
And that's the switch that happens with the belief set. And once you've become that true believer, as Eric Hoffer talks about in his book, True Believer, once you're fully invested emotionally and morally, that's when the cult leader has you, because over time, as the pressures of the cult environment and the demands that are part of a cult environment become greater and greater, the willingness to do whatever it takes, quote unquote, to get the goals of the group accomplished, you slide more and more over into a very immoral place where you find yourself knocking on people's doors at 3 a.m. because they've got to get the word, or you are disconnecting from your mother, right? Because she just doesn't get it.
Right.
She just doesn't get me, right? This is
Gotta
something
register
that would be
grandma into the course at all costs.
Yeah,
right?
Nana.
We've heard stories about that.
Right.
Exactly.
Or Nana.
And you end up stalking and harassing people and things like this, things you never would have done before. You have become, in other words, a weapon for the cult and for the cult's goals. And because you're empathetic, you believe with all your heart that you're doing this for the good of the world, that this is a good, moral, righteous movement. The predators don't suffer from that delusion. They know what's going on, and they know they're taking advantage of people. Empaths are in a delusional fog of goodness and righteousness. And that's why they're that's why I call them weaponized, because they're willing to do anything. I mean, I would have taken a bullet for Miscavige, and if given a little bit more push, it wouldn't have been hard to radicalize me as a Scientologist to get me to go put some bullets in other people. If I thought it was good because it wouldn't have been hard. Now, I wasn't radicalized in Scientology. I didn't commit violence because of Scientology. I'm saying
Right.
it wouldn't have
You
been
could see
hard to
how it
push
would.
me.
You
Well,
see
Right?
that in political movements as well,
That's
right?
when you're weaponizing your empaths, right? And I think you'll find, if you look into it, I've done a little bit of looking into this, suicide bombers are almost one for one people who are doing it because they care about their families, they care about their group, and they truly believe that, with Islamic terrorists, for example, that Western nations are absolutely destroying everything that they value and hold dear. It's not true that that's happening, but
right.
that's what they are
Yeah. And the
believe.
sacrifice I make will serve Allah, and in the future, I will have the 72 virgins in heaven or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
You got it.
Well, it's
You got it.
interesting.
So that's what I call a weaponized empathy.
So after you said that to me and I started reading about it and researching, but mostly been thinking a lot about it, I saw it a little bit differently, but interesting different layers. So what you're saying about modifying concepts. So I think it's even sneakier for the general person in that. So a group like Landmark comes in and you say, okay, responsibility, integrity, communication, these are the values, right? Right, what we say, responsibility, integrity, accountability, like these are the values. So I resonate with those values. I already had those values to some degree or another. I already think those things are important. I already think that, personal responsibility is an access to freedom. I already think, even if I didn't have the exact language that they introduced me to in Landmark, I'm already kind of moralistically or value aligned with the group. That's part of my attraction, I would say. And so I then and then as I get involved with the group, woohoo, this is a place where my values can make a difference. Because just me, single old, teen mom selling, building supplies, that's what I was doing when I entered into the Landmark Forum. In a destructive relationship, I don't have a lot of power. I can't do that. So I can be that in my own life, but I don't have any power to affect change. But when I find a group that aligns with my values, and then, okay, great, I can do that. And then the slow transference, it gets shortcutted down to, instead of saying like, hey, I think being responsible for, how your life's going, is a high value. I can say, oh, just do the Landmark Forum. Because if you just do the Landmark Forum, you'll get all these values. You'll get all this stuff, right? But in that way, I think, when I think back over my Landmark career, my desire for those values and the appearance, and I do say appearance about that's what Landmark's about, those two things line up. And then Landmark now has access to manipulating, exploiting, weaponizing me. So it starts with that. So I don't have to necessarily change my values, although there probably are groups that happens. I kind of come in lost and confused, and then I'm handed a set of values, or I'm handed a set of ideas or ideals that seem like they're going to help me control or manage my life. I've heard that as well. But I can see for me, like I was like, whoa, Landmark took what was important to me and then put it to work for itself, not for the world. That's why I say the appearance, because the bait and switch in the Landmark style group is that we are here to, basically make the world a more responsible, I started to slip into the Nexium thing, they're going to make it more ethical. But in Landmark, we're going to make it more integrous. And to be a graduate is to be a person who has recognized the value of responsibility, integrity, authenticity, all these values. And somehow magically being a graduate means that you're living by these. That's kind of let
me throw something out here, because we're saying the same thing.
Yeah,
and
we are.
So let me clarify what I meant, because I see how this went. I didn't mean to say or imply that somebody comes in, like for Landmark, for example, as an empath and doesn't have a concept of integrity or honesty. As empathetic people, we will have these things. That's why the programs are designed the way they are. They're trying to attract people who already have things that connect to these values. That's why they're empathetic, right? Predators don't
Yes.
connect to integrity, right? But when they see somebody pushing it, they go, here's some fresh bait for me, right?
It's a way to control people or to dominate people, or that's the interest.
What I mean by changing the values is once you're in and you're hooked, integrity, honor, spirituality, immortality, right? Scientology, whatever it is, whatever the ruin, quote unquote, is for you, that's going to get you hooked in. The value shift is not that integrity is good or honesty is good. It is that this group represents those values to such a degree
the barometer
that you must take up arms to defend this group, attack its enemies, and destroy them utterly in the name of forwarding this cause. I will do anything necessary, is where you eventually arrive to.
Right.
To forward this mission. And because the person is convinced that the mission is their value set, honor, integrity, honesty, truth, justice, whatever it is, they're marching to that beat. And in their head, they're saving the world, they're making the world a better place, they're providing, whatever.
Well, that's what I would say the mission is, right? So the mission
justifying
is
the means. Yeah.
The mission is, landmark, a frequent phrase in the Landmarkian language is a world that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out, which is what makes their abuse of their staff members so ludicrous, because it's like true for everybody except the people in the inside of the organization. So the hypocrisy right there is
also as long as they have $995, right?
And there's a mission, and then the values are the way to accomplish that mission. And our version of those values are, our group's access and exercising, to use a landmark word, the exercising of those values, the functioning of those values is done here better than anywhere else, better than da-da-da and da-da-da.
That's right. And the shift, see, that's the change. Before you got into the group, there were lots of ways to accomplish good in the world. But once you're stuck in the group, this is the only real way to do it, see? Everybody else doesn't really know what they're talking about, at least not to the degree we do. And in Scientology, just as an example, no one else knew what they were talking about. We were the only people who knew what we were talking about as far as we were concerned.
Yeah.
So it was really easy to get righteous. And
well, it's interesting because a lot of I think you would find in the landmark graduates, or you would find a spectrum. So you'd find people like, okay, look, I know this isn't the only way, but it's the fastest. It's 3 days in an evening. It used to only be $500. I just learned now it's almost 1,000. But anyway, it's the most accessible. It wasn't that it was it was quickest. Like that's a big thing in human potential is that's a big part of the hooks is you don't have to do all that nasty spiritual inner work or therapeutic work or psychological work. You don't have to do that. You can just come sit 3 days in an evening and you can get it. And then when you get it, you can magically live it, because they have a whole thing about
pop on Sundays.
If you're being it, then you'll automatically be taking actions consistent with it without having to go through all the messy thing of like building a habit and all that. So it's a lot of shortcutting, a lot of sort of magical thinking going on. But the main thing is I have a mission. And for me, that was a huge part. Like when you said that, it really resonated with me, because here I was uneducated because I'd had a child and was a single mom. So I was unable to go to school. And Landmark really did give me an opportunity to do some amazing job. They really did. That really did happen. And I really am grateful for it to this day.
And someone recognized your innate intelligence to begin with, right? They said, God, this is a smart lady.
Yeah. Well, I was a salesperson too. So that kind of gave me a little edge, because somebody had taken me under a wing when I was like 20 and said, I'm going to teach you sales because then you'll always be able to support yourself and your kids. So that really aided me in my Landmark career, because I was a really good salesperson, basically. And because I was a salesperson by, guess what? Finding out what you care about. Chris, what do you care about? And then I'm
Yeah,
going
it
to
was to
connect
you.
way
Yeah.
before this was the marketing thing. Well, I'm going to connect what you care about to the product I'm selling. And, and that's still alive. I probably get 5 emails today of somebody who will fill a coaching funnel for me, helping me sort out how to message that. Right. And, so that's where it starts with what do you care about? And now I'm going to connect whatever to what you care about. That's the beginning. That's what I now hear is the beginning of weaponizing empathy or empaths. Either way, that component is in there. What do you care about? Okay.
There's definitely a sales job happening there, no question about it. And to be clear, not every single person who's in a cult is or needs to be a weaponized empath. Again, not everybody is an empath, but even empaths are not always turned to. I'm kind of using this word as a degree of, to indicate an extreme degree of commitment and belief in a thing, right? I mean, when you're weaponized, you've been turned into a weapon.
Yes.
It's like the people who have
You
that
can do
innate
damage in
ability
the world
in
with
higher
what you
amounts.
do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we did. As cult members, we did do damage, right? I hurt people, and I hurt people because I thought I was helping them. A tough love approach, all kinds of goofy ideas and
Ruthless
rationalization.
compassion in Landmark. Yeah.
Yes, ruthless. There we go. Right, stuff like that. It's radical honesty. That's a whole nother.
Yeah.
By the
No,
way.
that's yeah.
Right.
Right. So that kind of thing where you're doing damage even, but it's all in the name of, Lifton wrote a book about Aum Shinrikyo, that Japanese sarin gas cult,
Okay.
called Destroying the World to Save It.
It's called what?
It's called Destroying the
Destroy
World
the
to
world
Save
to
It.
save it. Wow. Yeah.
Destroying the world to save it. And that's what they thought they were doing.
It's actually an old concept of like tearing something down all the way to the base and then rebuilding it. The phoenix rising from the ashes, like all that's
To me,
right.
part of
this
human
is the number
history,
one.
right? Yeah.
That
Yep.
whole trope, the whole that in order to transform, in order to change, you have to tear down. That is the trope that I'm now out against. I'm like,
Yep.
I used to believe in it thoroughly, and I have reaped certain amount of short-term value from that process, no doubt. But what I've mostly since participating in my diamond approach work, where I actually experienced insights and breakthroughs and transformations, without that part, it started to dawn on me like, oh, wait, you mean you don't have to completely fall apart and tear yourself down in order to transform? Wait, I don't have to make myself the bad guy. I don't have to pursue with punishment. I don't have, there's so many ways that gets lived out. And I just think that we are ready to evolve beyond that. We don't even have to make it wrong. Like, I don't have to get in a fight with anybody over whether it was right or wrong, or it was good or bad or whatever. That's irrelevant. It was both. It was all that. It was good sometimes and it was bad a lot of times. But what's cool, we don't need it. We don't have to tear down our entire ego structure in order to create ourselves as a new being. We don't have to do that.
It is a bit Sisyphean, isn't it? Right? Like, you're going to roll that rock up and it's going to roll back down every single time. But it feels like that in human history. If you just look at history, we've done that so many times, right? To the point where in the 20th century, it was very easy to do, like, we drop a nuclear bomb. It's like, well, we're doing this to stop the war. We're doing this to save people. And so that's the extreme degree of that, right? But it's always been part of, we could argue, is it part of human nature? It's definitely part of human culture and history to have those waves of that, right? Destroy something, build it back up. Oh, now it got too big or it got too much this way, and let's destroy that and build it again. Or they're doing the wrong thing, so let's destroy them, kind of stuff.
That's right. The whole salt the earth thing. Yeah. No, it's been a common historical thing. But it's always, since we're talking about this, and this just occurred to me, I have to share this with you because it's like, oh, this is a good analogy. Because you're absolutely right. You can't, this idea of renewal and tearing it all down and resetting, there are places in the real world, like tearing houses down and stuff like that, where that kind of thing, like, okay, that works. That's not how this works.
Right.
The brain, right?
Right.
It ain't. You don't have a reset button, and there's no reverting back to childhood and starting over again. All you're doing, it's like a diagram I saw yesterday. of all the roads that had been built on top of each other in England. Here's
From the
here's
Roman
here's
times.
the original, chalk white, under thing, right? And then
Right.
here's where the Romans were here, and there's where the Normans were here, and then here's where the Celts were here, and it's just one on top of another because they just keep building on each other. This is
So you
called
get the M5.
progress.
Yeah.
And everything you're doing is not clearing things out here. It's building on top of what's already there. And, and you got to kind of know that because it's a good way to think about being progressive instead of regressive
Right.
in your thinking,
Well, and it gets
point
rid of the
that-
fantasy.
Go ahead.
Well, because it gets rid of the fantasy. So a big trope in the landmark world is completing your past, complete your past, complete your past. Another term that I'm out to dismantle because that's not actually a thing. Back to my favorite book, What Makes Your Brain Happy and Why to Do the Opposite. You literally don't work that way. It doesn't, and trauma doesn't work that way. And that's where it's become dangerous because we go into a 3-day weekend and we have a opening, we have a experience where maybe we open up some awareness and then we're like, okay, I'm done. Except then it comes back up a month later, 6 months later, and then the shame and guilt monsters take over. Wait, I transformed that.
Whiff
But
of
I
a
transformed that
Madeleine
in February of
can bring back your
1997.
remembrance
Why?
of things past, right?
Right.
Because that's not how roads are built, people. That's not how people are built. It's not how brains are built. It doesn't work that way. It is a lie. Now, people will say, oh, well, they don't really mean that. They mean, like you completed that incident or you completed that moment or it's complete in this now moment. Okay, great.
Got
Well, then
over
say
it.
that. Like,
Yeah.
hey, Mark, this conversation right now, I'm complete with the conversation. Anything else you wanted to say? Da, da, da. Okay,
I'm not
that's
pissed at you anymore, and I still like you. How about that? We could just say,
Yay.
yeah, you really pissed me off,
Yeah.
and I'm not pissed at you anymore, and I love you, so let's just move on. No, it's more about, let's complete, yeah. I think
Well, it gets
notable
reduced.
exception to that, like, well, you can't completely rewrite that or rewire that. The exception is like a lobotomy, right? Or like electroshock therapy, like where you're literally erasing chunks of the brain, like that would
Well, we used to
be an exception,
advertise
right?
the way we talked about transformation. So in Landmark, Chris, don't you know? So here's what's different about Landmark. It's not about change. Anybody can do incremental change. You can, you can change.
Just
You can
brings
do a
more of
little
the
bit
same.
more, better, different of the one that was before and da-da-da. And that's kind of the way human beings have done it forever. And, look, it works to a certain degree, but it takes a lot of time. In 3 days and an evening, you can actually transform. To transform transcends change. It literally, I don't even know. I don't know if I can say it with a straight face anymore, Mark. You might have to pick up from her today.
The whole, what you're talking about, the whole TP&E thing, right? The transformation, possibility, and enrollment as a technology.
Landmark's primary product, what it has used to bring people in, is transformation. That's the mission. So Scientology's mission sounds like was to clear the planet. Landmark's mission was to transform the planet. Well, then that begs the question, okay, well, what do you mean by transformation? What is transform? And I don't know about you, Mark, but I don't know if I ever got a good answer to that. Could tell me everything that it isn't. It isn't change. It isn't, yeah, right. Well, and how do we transform
everyone to
the
do
planet?
the damn course, and then we'll be transformed, right?
Well, everybody becomes a graduate because you know that to be a graduate means that you're living from responsibility, accountability, integrity, these values. That's what it means to be a graduate. Is you are a conscious person. You're a person who is operating from these particular values. Except for most of the graduates I know are not. I mean, they're not most.
They already
but
were
many
to
of
a
them,
certain
including
degree,
myself
just not
to a certain
all the
extent.
time.
Yeah. Well, my mom used to say this thing when I was a girl. She told me, honey, because we were Christians, we were non-denominational, born again Christians, right? I always say I was a Tammy Faye Christian. So, but she would tell me all the time, oh, when you're looking to do business with somebody, if it says they're a Christian or it has the fish on the business card, don't do business with them, because if they have to advertise that they're a Christian, they're probably not a real Christian. And I thought of that when you brought up this weaponizing empath thing, because it was kind of like, if I have to come out with my mission, if I have to come out with my, and that's the thing, then am I opening up to weaponize that, in
Wasn't
some
there a
way,
Bible
either
verse
by,
that said something like, when you pray, go into your quiet place and pray by yourself? Man who declares his faith in the town square is not to be trusted, something like that. I mean, there's some scripture that's like that, right? Yeah.
Sure, sure. There's a lot of weaponized empaths in Christianity, especially evangelical
yes,
Christianity. It's a
Yeah.
lot of people who want, and this is really all I mean by this is you have a person who sincerely, truly, in their heart of hearts, they want a better world. They want people to get along. They want people to be
right,
good. They want people to follow the law. They want to raise a family. They want their kids to do well in life. They want opportunities for people. They're empathetic people,
yes,
but they've been convinced through a series of deceptions and indoctrinations, brainwashing, if you will, that the way to accomplish those goals, those empathetic goals,
yes,
is to do some of the worst crap in the world to other people.
yes,
And they've reframed it in their mind because of the machinations of the cult and the cult leader, that by doing these things to people, they're doing them a solid. They're good. They're not doing bad. And it's not dissimilar to, people who are raised on the principle that, spare the rod, spoil the child, right? It's like they
mm,
think they're doing good by
right,
beating their child into psychosis. And that's what some people do. They beat their children into being psychotics.
It's the principle of
Happens,
chemotherapy, isn't
right?
it? Right? It's like we're going to get rid of the cancer by bombarding you with poison. It's going to probably destroy a lot of really good tissue in your body, but hopefully will kill the cancer.
Exactly. And these guys have it so reframed that even when they're doing bad, destructive, horrible things like defrauding somebody of their of credit card fraud or something like that, they think they're actually helping this person. They've got it
yes,
reworked in their head. They're not purposefully running around hurting people thinking that's what they're doing, right? Sacrifices have to be made sometimes.
right,
Omelets, have to get made by breaking some eggs. That they'll think about it that way. But they don't think they're doing bad, horrible, evil stuff, even when they are literally sitting there doing the bad, horrible, evil stuff.
well, and
And
I,
it's worse than just silence is complicity or something. It's that they actively believe this is good.
right.
And that's what it does to the person that is so horrible that turns them into a weapon.
The other place I've seen this play out, I just thought of as you were describing that, Chris, is the whole thing about ego. Or in Landmark, we would talk about the little self versus the big self. So the little self was meant to sort of talk
Identity.
about that
Yeah.
egoic or identity structure. So I would now call it egoic structure, right? That sense of personality and identity structure that we all develop as we evolve as human beings. I'm a this kind of person. I'm a that kind of person. I'm a whatever. Landmark we refer to those often as stories. Things happened in your life and then you made a decision and then you live from the decision, not from what happened. So weird how it just randomly comes out of my mouth and I don't ever talk about this anymore. But that I know, a lot of what we were doing in our programs and as program leaders a lot is we didn't use the word ego, we use the word identity, but it's kind of like helping people get past who they wound up being. That's another big term. Who you wound up being is another way to refer to identity or ego structure. And one of the things I've learned in my spiritual work I've done since leaving Landmark is your ego structure is great. Like, leave it alone. It's fine. It sometimes has some negative information, whatnot, but it's done a good job keeping you alive so far. It's kept you alive. There's stuff to be honored there. It's not a bad thing. But a lot in groups like this, the ego is villainized. The worldly self, like in religions, right? Wouldn't it a lot be like the worldly self, the secular self? That would have been
The
in my
desires
mom's.
of the body.
Yes.
Yes, like
That's
we've
right.
always got to have this villain. And, if we just, now I worry because one of the things that a lot of human potential groups have done is so erased villain that then we literally don't see villains and we become prey of villains, right? So, everything can be taken too far. But
That's right.
this whole, like, okay, there's this villain. We've got a way to protect you from this villain, even if the villain is yourself. That's most of what the human potential personal development groups are doing, is they're teaching you to protect you from yourself. Well, that's really sad. You don't need
Isn't it?
protection from yourself.
I know they make it out that there are parts of you that you need to dissociate from because they're somehow like evil and separate from you and not you. And I mean, Scientology has the reactive mind and the body thetans and all that crap. Everybody's got their devil, right? I think I said we talked about that.
We were talking about that the other day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing, right? Because and it has a lot of utility because for a cult leader, one, it directs attention away from what they're doing, and two, it unites people because if they have a common enemy, people are so easy. It's the fastest, easiest way to unite people.
Most populist movements are like
energy.
that, right? Yeah, nationalist movements.
That's right. That's exactly right. Find an enemy, point everybody at it. Everybody suddenly moves in unison to that, right? Very, 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 propaganda 101. Cult leader 101. That's what they do, right? That's why they have to create.
I think that's important that the enemy becomes the enemy within. That's a really big insight here. I want to circle and underline and highlight that.
And that an endlessly renewable resource of enemy there.
Exactly, because you're always
going to be something over there with you. Yeah.
Yes, and with integrity, with loosey-goosey ideas like integrity or honor or spirituality or ethics, as they do in Scientology or in other groups, you can always move the goalpost. There's
your
never
integrity is always going out. So that's what it is in Landmark.
Who are you being that the bus hit you? Who are you being? This is how they do it in Landmark, right?
Yes.
Even now, I have a very good friend who's in one of the master classes, and this person is hilarious, like texting me hilarious notes and kind of going a little bit nutty because it's so nonsensical. And I don't remember if I texted this back to you or not because it dawned on me the devil in Landmark right now, anyway, is your integrity. So if you're not being without integrity, nothing works. Then you're not being a graduate. You're not being cause in the matter. You're not, whatever. They'll tie it to a bunch of other things. But the integrity is the devil because your integrity is always going out. It's always going out. So your job in life is to be kind of putting in the integrity. And it's particularly comical because this is super preached from, the Werner level. And Werner's integrity sucks. It's terrible. It's just terrible in the sense that, he's harming people. And, recognizing that is, and that isn't something that you can integrity your way out unless you go and get the, appropriate professional support to support you to not do that, and to work through whatever that is. So that's really interesting. Yeah. So weaponized empaths, it was I checked with our AI people just for fun. So a couple of other ways that it came up, the term, and I thought was interesting, misinformation. So weaponized empathy can be used to spread misinformation and confusion about a topic by targeting people's emotional responses. So I think I hear you speaking about that a little bit. Like, I'm going to put out this misinformation and that's going to get you all riled up.
This is almost the entire anatomy of the anti-vax movement, by the way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
These are very caring people.
Put a microchip in your brain, and they're going to control you. And notice how many kids have autism now.
All of it.
Vaccines,
That's right. But all of it is built on a foundation of deep, deep emotional pain and care for themselves and other people.
Gotcha.
That's why they're doing it, right? Why they feel so right about it. It's life or death, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, it's this notion of like, the drag queens are grooming our children to be gay. So, if you love children, you'll hate drag queens. It's just like.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, it's always the pastor.
Weaponize.
It's always the, the church organist or the pastor or someone, the coach that's doing the actual harming of the children. Meanwhile, drag queens are just putting on makeup and reading stories to kids,
Of course.
So it's really great. I'm really getting it's the weaponization of that which is in us to do good, to that desire. The other one that it brought up was narcissists. Narcissists may use superficial display of empathy to manipulate others and gain sympathy. That I have seen a bunch of as well. I've seen, as I've learned to recognize narcissism, I'm not talking about the natural narcissism that's in every human being. I'm talking about the personality disorder level stuff, which is all around us. And the human potential movement has done a lot to foster. It's not affectionately known as the me movement, right? As we all kind of became somewhat narcissistic corporations use empathy to get their customers, get inside their customers' heads and sell products. There's whole boards of like, okay, how are we going to get that? It's interesting. There's a component here about eliciting that emotional response, getting that care or fear are tied together very closely, right? Because I wouldn't be afraid unless there's something I care about.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I wanted, so Chris, what are your thoughts about, for people, and we have some questions in the audience as well, but my question is this.
Good.
How do you as an empathetic person, whether you're an empath, like someone who, like, there's the empath who like literally feels the pain and like cannot walk by something or something out in the street and go, oh my God, I have to stop. And there's the unhoused person, I got to help them like at all costs. And then there's those of us who go, oh God, I feel so terrible about that. Here's $1, right? There's levels of empathy, right? But how can people who are naturally empathetic recognize and avoid being taken advantage of by a predator? I mean, one of the questions we have is, how do you distinguish the predator from the weaponized empath?
Yeah,
and
that's
like,
a good question.
For us as empathetic people, how do we go, wait a minute, are they going to take advantage of me?
Yeah, exactly. It's almost, it's not an unimportant question at all, but for practical purposes, the difference between them doesn't matter a whole lot. You got to get away from them, right?
Okay, yeah.
Like if you see people doing this, right? It's like, because when you're in a cult, again, this is intervention level stuff. You're not going to just talk somebody out of this and I point it out to them and they're going to go, oh, it doesn't, these are people who are way too into what they're believing. You don't just say, well, I don't really appreciate that you're acting like that, and they're going to see the error of their ways. They're not going to see the error of their ways. They're going to double down and come at you harder. So in a way, if you start seeing the red flags of cultic recruitment or involvement or something like that, the thing to do is back away slowly or quickly and do that. But as far as, that's what I would say first off, actually.
Well, and I would add a boundary, like just saying, hey, I appreciate that thing, because mostly how this shows up a lot is in the recruitment tactics, oh, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do, I know I'm telling you, like that, and to just say, hey, I appreciate that you care about me. I appreciate that you have gotten tremendous value from this thing, whether it's your religion or a group you participate or whatever, or a product even. And I'm not interested. And when and if I do get interested, I will come find you. I will ask you. In the meantime, I request that let's leave that out of our conversations. And I've learned how to do that. So I actually have a whole coach for teaching me how to not overextend myself, because I'm the one, Mark, who would walk by the person in the home and take them home with me. Okay, so
yeah,
I am
gonna find you a place to live, and I'm gonna feed you, and have you go work for my aunt in her boutique, and yeah.
I have a therapist, a coach, and a spiritual teacher. The spiritual teacher and the coach especially have worked with me a lot on this. And one of the biggest things that they've taught me is, one, to let people come to me or meet people where they're at. So I'm also a big health nut, right? So if you, there's a couple things I'll probably go, if you were to light up a cigarette in front of me, I'd be like, oh, going for cancer. I might do the same with a Diet Coke.
Got on a little depth there, are you?
Yeah. There's a healthy dose of righteousness that comes, that's kind of the reward for the weaponized empath, is the like adrenaline, the little hit you get, the dopamine hit you get for being right?
Right? Yeah.
Oh,
that's
heck
right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's where it's at, man. That's what we're really doing it for. Come on. So,
right.
But the one big thing that taught me is, like, let people come to you, let them say, hey, I want to have a conversation, or, hey, I know you're super into nutrition. What do you think about this? Or, or, hey, I heard you did that. I know you're super involved with Landmark, and I'm dealing with this thing in my life. Do you think that would make a difference for me? But the point is, that's how you de-weaponize yourself, is you stop inserting yourself in everybody's everything all over. And that
very
takes,
much.
Stop saving the world, right?
Yeah.
You gotta stop saving the world.
Well, it's really coming to a place, at least in my own journey, it was coming to a place where it really hit me between the eyes that the world doesn't need saving. The world's not going anywhere, right?
No.
It's the old George Carlin quote, right? The world's not going anywhere. Planet doesn't need saving, right?
Turning all by itself without.
Exactly. Earth is going to be fine. It's us
Right.
who might be going.
The
But
little ants
another
falling
approach-
going to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. Another approach I thought of, very, very, very similar to what you were just talking about in dealing with somebody else who's doing this to you, might be if they're a friend or family member, it's like a relation, right? Somebody who matters. It is a simple question. Is it okay with you? Is it really, kind of sit them down, right? But is it okay with you if I think differently than you do? And just have that conversation. If it's
Cool
because
concept.
there's some people you're going to be surprised to find out the answer is no, it's not okay with me. And then you're like, oh, well, I'm glad we figured that out.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I'm not changed my mind. So maybe we're at a crossroads here. Or not. Maybe they go, hey, wow, yeah, maybe it is okay with me that you think differently. Great. So let's not do that. Let's go talk about something we do have common ground on.
Right.
I've seen that in a lot of Facebook
it's-
conversations recently when it comes to politics, right? Like,
Yeah,
like people
that's
just
right.
deleting people wholesale from their feed who on the quote unquote other side, right? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And
Well,
sometimes sometimes it's appropriate. I'm not saying don't draw boundaries. This is a form of drawing boundaries, right? And, you can have who you want in your life. And so if people are in your life who are going to be insistent on their way or the highway, you might have some decisions to make. And that's up to you and your relationships, But
I really like that.
culture, remember that, weaponized empaths and cults are all about not giving you those choices. And in fact, pushing and pushing and pushing, sometimes until you do feel like you need to blow up, which you don't necessarily want to do. So maybe, some sharp and pointed questions earlier on. The thing to watch out for with anybody who's demonstrating this kind of thing is a thing they all have in common is the adoption of the concept that the end justifies the means. That's what I mean about a morality shift, because that's the moral theme of a cult is the end justifies the means, and the end doesn't justify the means.
right.
Increasingly
expressed
it in
my
increasingly
book.
strange means.
Yes.
Well, and I
That's-
expressed the kind of milder, more subtle version in my book, which is going along to get along. Like, okay, I'm going to put up with this thing over here so that I can get along, so that I can get to because the ends justifies the
Up
means,
to
right?
something really great,
Fair
right?
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I got it. They're underpaying people and, and there's these problems here and there and whatever, but, every organization has it. And, the other thing is exempting myself. Like, okay, I'm not doing that. I had somebody say that even about the Werner thing when asked, like, well, wait, about him abusing staff because you've been close enough. Anybody who's in his inner sanctum sees it. They don't necessarily see the physical assault, but they see the verbal and emotional assault. You can't not see it when you're hanging around them at all. And and this person said to me, they're like, yeah, well, he doesn't do it to me. And now as an empath, I was like, what? Just because he doesn't do it to me, then that's not my marker. My marker is, are they doing anybody getting hurt? I mean, my
That's
thing
right.
is if people are getting hurt, then somebody needs to intervene, right? So
I
call
hear
the
my
police,
neighbor
call the fire
hitting
department,
his
whatever.
kids every night, but he's not hitting me, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. It's like, well, what kind of
Right.
person are you at that point? Yeah.
But that's a devaluation of ourselves that ultimately comes and gets us. It comes because it
Right.
turns us into something other than who we want to be, who we profess to be. Really
That's
great.
right.
Mark, do we
Exactly
have
right.
any other?
Yeah, we have some
questions?
really great ones. Yeah. And
Yeah.
relatively benign places like nonprofit societies weaponize empaths.
No. Because that doesn't go along with the concept of benign.
They're not benign. Yeah,
If
exactly.
you have a benign organization, they're not adopting a principle, a moral theme of the end justifies the means, right?
Yeah.
You can have, any individual can go off the deep end. Absolutely, right? They
And
can
any
radicalize.
organization can have corruption, I would think, right? Corruption's
Absolutely.
a slightly different
Right.
thing. And I've seen that in not-for-profits pretty regularly.
That's right. Yeah, but that's a whole different thing from I'm talking about the path to radicalization
where it's
here, right? We're not
intentionally
talking about
using someone
having
to
a bad day at
weaponize. Yeah.
work.
Can people who follow particular ideologies, apart from conspiracy theorists, be considered weaponized empaths? They care about helping the world, but an ideology isn't a cult.
But it can be. It depends. Can people who follow particular ideologies, no, I would not phrase it this way. I would say the answer to this question is no, because what it does is it opens the door to, oh, all conservatives are weaponized empaths or something, and I ain't going there.
Yeah.
No way.
That's why I didn't read the question
broad
right in front
like
of that. Yeah, we're just gonna avoid that part
Yeah.
there. So here's one. Werner and Ron L. Hubbard both rail against psychology, mental health issues, yet they're both domestic abusers and check the boxes of malignant narcissist dark triad. They railing so hard against their own self-hatred.
Yes, they are.
Yes.
Yes, they are. I
So
can prove it without
that's the
Hubbard.
whole
I
thing
don't
of
know.
narcissism. Yeah.
Yeah, I can prove it with Hubbard because he actually has writings that show it. Werner probably has, private journals or whatever, but yeah,
Well,
it
Werner
tends
and
to
I
be that.
had a conversation about this actually a little bit. So, because
Okay.
Werner stepped in. Now, remember, I came to know Werner in his 70s. So, and from all the people I'm talking with who were with him in his younger years, I would definitely say I got the more mellowed version. You know what I mean? I've got a matured, more mellow version of the man. He also was very careful with me because I was the cash cow. So, he was going to be good and charming and, all of that. And, but my daughter has complex PTSD, and he actually he offered to have a meeting and do a session, as it were, with her and spent a couple of hours with her. And I saw him have a number of interactions in the Being a Leader course, as we were producing that, as I was hosting that course, with people who had, what were clearly psychological issues, suicidal ideation and so on. And he would say, like, you need to go to the doctors that can help you with that. He would actually point people towards psychological help. I heard him do it a handful of times. So he wasn't, I don't know that he was for it, but I think for sure he had learned by then that it's not good publicity to go against it, right? When he worked with my daughter, he called me afterwards and we were talking, and he was sort of telling me his impressions of what she was dealing with, which were really interesting. He said, she's all sensation, which I would love to. I'm not sure if he's ever read The Body Keeps the Score or whatnot, but what he was describing actually was how complex PTSD is a very embodied experience, right? So there's a lot of how it manifests is in all this body anxiety and so on. He was picking up on that. But what he told me at the time was he literally said, yeah, you need to call so-and-so, can't remember the guy's name, who invented ACT, action commitment therapy. He said, the only psychological, path that's worth a shit. So that I would say that was so there was double things, right? Like he'd figured out that just poo-pooing psychology was not a smart way to go. People, especially as it got more accepted and it became more the norm and so on, he himself, there's no evidence that he ever participated in anything that was designed to work on the likely mental health issues that he has or has dealt with, right? Like so he never did any of that himself.
Sounds like a case of, in later in life, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and render unto God that which is God. Like, you go deal with that over there. Yes. I'm not going to touch it because I don't know about that, but you go deal with that over there. Yeah.
And he would say, like, there was a whole interaction in our 2018 course that was not healthy which was somebody dealing with a deep and intense psychological issue. And Werner in the interaction, he was fairly like, oh no, you should definitely seek professional help related to that, da-da-da. And then he worked with him for like an hour on rackets, to kind of show where it's a persistent complaint with a fixed way. That's rackets, Chris, a persistent complaint with a fixed way of being that has costs and payoffs, right? So it costs you love, affinity, and joy, but you're getting to be right, justified, da-da-da-da-da.
And Scientology, they call those surface facsimiles.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
I knew there was a direct corollary from
And the
Scientology.
commonality
Direct
being that
corollary.
you keep it going continuously because you get the
You
pay of it.
continue a
Yeah.
disability or some problem or issue because it makes you right other people wrong, serves you, gets in other people's way. It's a
milking it.
mental image picture that services you by you gain sympathy, you gain support, you gain financial help, etc.
And again,
by
what kind of facsimile is it?
service. It
Service
services
facsimile.
you.
Okay, I heard
Service
service, but it's
facsimile.
service.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Wow.
they call it surfacking. Oh, if you're trying to be right about something that you might be wrong about, right? You're surfacking.
Okay, well, in Landmark, you're racketing.
Racket.
Yeah.
You're running a racket. Yeah.
There you go. Sorry, I just it was too.
No,
It's a fairly esoteric concept. It's a little hard to explain to people.
Sorry.
But it's that. Yeah.
It's the same thing.
That.
Yeah. And we all have that. We all can recognize very instantly someone who's milking their issue, milking their problem for sympathy, right? That's kind of how you'd say in common parlance. Like, you're getting something out of it.
That's right.
Oh, poor you.
That's
It's
right.
always you. You're always a victim. Blah, blah, blah. And it's like there is value in distinguishing that for oneself, right? Like I would say it's nice for me to the distinction, the concept of rackets is kind of it's useful. Like, okay, if I keep complaining, I'm either going to keep complaining about it or I'm going to just drop it and get over it, right? But this is where it can be weaponized, right? This stuff can be weaponized so easily because it's always you.
Exactly.
Right? It's always turned back onto you. You're running a racket. Where's your integrity out? Who were you being that happened to you?
Well, see, here's the thing. That's exactly right. See, let me say this real fast. There's behavior. People do things. We can see that they do that. People try to be right. People milk for sympathy or victimhood, that kind of thing, right? But then these guys take that one easy to see behavior, and then they put this weird kind of label on it and say it actually is this whole mental thing. And so here's the solution to it. No, it's just a behavior.
Yeah.
But all this other stuff is such bullshit. People do this.
Hello.
But we don't have to create literally fantasy, delusional mental constructs that don't exist in any neural structure in any way. And we're going to invent this thing, and then we're going to sell you on the solution to it. And that right there is the whole mechanism of the cult con. So I just want to take this moment to highlight that.
That's
brilliant. That's
well,
perfect.
but there's a deeper nuance that goes to something you said to me the other day, that you made this comment that there's this thing that happens that's so simple and so basic that it goes unnoticed, which is in these experiential type trainings, okay, which these all the human potential stuff is basically based on experience. It's about, you're going to come into this course and you're going to have an experience. And then how that works is they tear you all down. So part of the thing about racket is, what's a persistent, something you complain about all the time. Oh, how are you being with that? Okay. It's costing you all this stuff. So why do you keep doing it? There's got to be this is all breakdown technique. I'm breaking you down. And then, okay, there's got to be something. What are you doing? What are you being right about? Until they see what an asshole they are, because they're getting these secret, hidden, yummy, delicious things. But that's the breakdown part.
Yeah.
That's the part where you're attacking yourself. That's where you're going and you're going, oh my God, look at me. I will give up joy. Instead of joy and affinity and love, I'm going to be right. What an asshole I'm in. And the joke from all the way back to the S days is that the freedom available in S is simply getting you're an asshole and your life doesn't work. If you can live you're an asshole and your life doesn't work, you have access to unlimited freedom and full self-expression. That is the Landmark methodology, like kaboom.
In a nutshell.
Now, the thing is, you're only going to do that work when you're compressed in an environment, right? When you're in a course or you're in a program, you're never going to just do that on your own. You've got to do that with a coach. You got to do that in a program. You do whatever. But it's still all about breaking you down to break through.
Yep. No asshole who road rages is ever going to stop in the middle of his road rage and go, wait a minute, I'm getting a payoff from making that lady wrong because she's hitting the brakes too much, right? No, you're not going to stop in the middle of it and do that, right? yeah, you need
Well,
the
you don't have to have a
environment.
reason. You can also just be like, oh wow, I was really an asshole, and that I've had to say that to my husband a few times, like, oh honey, I'm sorry, I was just
You need
being
to lay off the
I was
horns.
just being a jerk with you because you're annoying me.
Yeah.
Like, and I apologize. Like, it doesn't. I like what you're saying, Chris, about like they create
Ain't
these
that
whole
deep.
machinations, but that's the product. Like, and does it have value? Sure, it has value. If it didn't have value, it wouldn't work. I love Sarah says this all the time. Like, no cult would exist if it didn't give something that was worth
Mm.
having.
Yeah. No one joins a
Whether
cult,
that's
they join a good
community,
thing.
whether it's ideas, we always join a good thing. We don't join a cult, which just goes right to the weaponized empath thing.
True.
Yeah.
True.
All
True.
right, Mark, do you have any other
Wow.
questions? And I have a
No,
finale
some thank
question.
yous,
Chris.
some thank yous from the audience for Chris for being with us and sharing your experiences. Yeah. So yeah.
I want to ask Chris as we wrap up here for this time. We'll be having many more conversations. So whether it's on Chris's show or my show or at the upcoming Seek Safely Summit, little preview coming up. But you gave me this great rundown one time on what are kind of the stages of deconstructing or deprogramming that one
Sure.
can expect. Like, as you start to wake up and go, wait, something's not right here. And you start thinking, you just one day you rattled off these like, and I thought that is so great. So will you share that with our audience?
Yeah. Let me see if I can duplicate that. I hope I'm.
Any
I hope
version
I'm,
of it that comes out will be great.
Yeah. Let me give you this. Basically, coming out of a cult or coming out of a cultic situation or a coercive situation, battered situation. Okay, physical safety first, obviously. First thing. Resources, job. The second thing, right? Do you have a roof over your head? Do you have access to food? Do you have access to transportation?
Those
Because
hierarchies.
if you don't have those three things, yeah, if you don't have that, yeah, exactly. Actually, it is Maslow's hierarchy. You're literally climbing the stages, and you have to start with the physical stuff first because you can't self-actualize if you're hungry or tired, right? You can't do that.
We'll have another show about that. They're actually finding out that's not so true, but we'll have another conversation about Maslow's hierarchies and the way that got twisted from a. But anyway, but yes. So you want to come out? Are you safe? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm only using Maslow in a comparative way. I'm not trying to.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Myself to every single thing.
I'm the one who
said.
So sorry.
But it's good because that is where I base this off of. And also another really early step that I think personally is very, very important in your steps out is as quickly as you can, stop using the language. I can't think of a faster way to deprogram yourself if we're going to use that term. It was not a term I enjoy using, by the way, but just since it's out there. I can't think of a faster, more effective thing to do right at the get-go than stop using the language. Force yourself to find English equivalents for every single cult phrase or thing that you were told or used. That's just a way to start changing your brain as quickly as possible. It's still going to take time.
Well, it has a big side benefit, though, because I took that on actually when I left in 2012, even though I was still going to be selling Warner and stuff. I was like, I knew I talked funny. I needed to lose that. But what's been really cool out of doing that, first of all, the dictionary is the most used app on my phone. But I've learned so much. That's what's really, so I'm kind of a hoover for learning. So out of having to find a different way to say it, like, I'm not going to say getting complete. Okay, wait, what am I actually trying to say? I'm actually just trying to say like, oh, Mark, okay, I appreciate this conversation. And that upset is done for me. Thank you so much. Like, not using the language, not using the cliches has really opened up thinking and critical thinking. So there's a big benefit too, not just deprogramming, but actually, if you're a learner, it's really cool actually to find new ways to say things.
Because all the jargon, a lot of the jargon are thought terminating cliches, right? Which we've talked about before. Like exactly the jargon themselves can just stop you from questioning.
You got it.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Thank you, Lifton.
The two things that you're doing by eschewing the language is one, you are getting rid of the thought stopping cliches. You stop doing that to yourself. And two, you have created over the period of time that you've been in this group, as you do with any group you're part of, neural pathways. And the more you think about or do a thing, the stronger and more, sort of reinforced that neural pathway becomes. to where it becomes a habit. You just think that way because it's automatic for you to, because like you mentioned earlier, it's an energy issue. Your brain is using 30% of the energy that your body is consuming already. When it goes into thinking and overdrive and learning, it's using more. It's a tiring process, right? So the brain is doing everything it can to save energy. And so you work with your brain rather than against it by changing those pathways, right? And unlike what the gurus tell you, there is no quick fix for this. It takes time. It didn't take a day to form those pathways. It's not going to take a day to rewire them. So that's the
Beautiful.
The nitty gritty of that one. Okay, resources, support network is vital. You can't do this alone. Find and create a support network, friends, family, anything you can get, social services, cult services. There are people out there. There are resources out there. Google is your friend. Find them, right? And take advantage of them. Don't think, that you have to be some strong survivor, right? You have help out here. Take advantage of it.
Luckily, these days, it's in the zeitgeist, right? Like this is a conversation now, which hasn't been in the conversation in the past. So people are, even from the titillating kind of, I want to listen to a podcast about that weird culty thing, that thank God I'm not in it, right? But then you listen after a while, you're like, I have something that I do that is a little bit like that.
Exactly. If you were to tell people now, I got out of Scientology a month ago or something, you're going to have way more understanding ears and people who are going to be wanting to help you than 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah. Say what you want about Leah Remini, but she's done that for
Landmark is still
a lot of
new.
people.
For that, join book club. We'll put the resources for people who are wanting to question Landmark, because we don't. It's fairly new, but yeah, we're creating those resources as fast as we can. So so we can talk to each other and explore, and
Exactly. Now the big one, the big one, and the one that takes all the time, is the education, post-cult education. Because it just takes time to learn stuff, right? And some of us enjoy it like crazy, and other people maybe not so much, right? Do what you can, do what's comfortable for you, but do something, because here's the thing. You won't change until you change yourself. When you're part of a group that is a mind control, mind altering group, and Landmark is, it is doing things to you, and you're not aware of all the things it's doing to you. You think you are, but you're not. This doesn't work that way. There's things that were done to you that you don't know anything about. Until you learn about them and undo it and take the steps to undo it, it will stay, and you will have action patterns and habits and ways of thinking that you don't like and that surprise you sometimes and that come out of nowhere sometimes. And you're going to want, what the hell, right? Why is it? Because you need to do the work.
That can include these
other way around
these knee-jerk defensive reactions that people have when you say bad things about the group, right? Like we're getting that.
Exactly.
Like, Ann and I are bearing the brunt of that right now with people just knee-jerk, like, but you, I got all this great stuff out of it. So what you're saying is that like, unless people can distinguish something that was done to them, they're gonna have that knee-jerk reaction.
Of course they are, because there's an emotional center to it all that it's all hooked on. It's these things. We're talking about beliefs and ideas and constructs, but underneath all of that are emotions. And if you can imagine that all of the beliefs and ideas and indoctrination and things that you accept about the group you were part of, and that the belief set is like a bunch of balloons on string. It's the hand holding it. It's a stupid analogy, but that's the emotional center that keeps it all there. You can pop all the balloons, but the hand's still sitting there holding all of that stuff so tight. Even when all the balloons are popped and there's no reason to believe any of it, the emotions are still sitting there.
Right.
And you've got to deal with those. And you don't get there on day one. You got to drill down to those emotions and that layer of stuff. And that takes learning. It takes learning about critical thinking, but it also takes learning about emotional intelligence. I think that is part of critical thinking. And that's when you start digging in and piling through the layers, and getting to the bottom of it. Or I think, as you said, the octopus on your face, right?
Yes.
Get the thing off. I have always we always talk about it in the ex-Scientology world as onion layers that you're stripping down.
Yeah.
You
My
peel
God,
one.
you just ruined half of the landmark community. We're like, no, we talked about onions.
I know.
Oh, it was
It's a
actually
common thing in
Outback
the ex
Steakhouse,
world.
you guys. It was Outback Steakhouse, and
Yeah,
they
The
deep
chef
fried it.
says.
that's right.
It's so,
Now, let me
so important what
let
you're
me throw
saying. It's
three
really
more
good.
things real fast.
Sure.
Let me throw out 3 more steps real fast,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
we'll
Yeah,
be
perfect.
That's great.
therapy, self-work. Okay, however you do that, however you go about that. There's lots of paths. There's no one right way. There is zero assembly line, and there is not any one person who has the assembly line for how to deal with ex-cult members. Everybody's doing it different because every single one of us are different. And
Right.
it's the cults that have assembly lines, not therapy, right? That work
The
is
only thing
individual.
is this where you would
Cookie
add
cutter.
the piece about, because I've seen this in the landmark community as well, but you also need to go get outside of the cult group or mindset. So, I mean, a lot of people are coming and talking to me, and I'm happy to talk to them. But the first thing I did was I put together a group with Rachel Bernstein. I'm talking to you, right?
Mhm.
People who are outside or ahead of you in the game. So, because that's one thing I saw that kept a lot of abuse in place in Landmark is you're told to sort of, even if you see things are wrong or the thinking of the practices or whatever, okay, great. So go talk to somebody who could do something about it. But what that did is it created this insular spin. So
Right.
even if
Right.
you were sort of confronting something, you were still inside the
Kept you-
group. You need
yeah,
to
kept
get
you in there.
outside.
No, but spread your wings. You absolutely need to do that. In fact, the final 2 things I've got here are, one, and this is really put here because everybody forgets about it. And it's really important. And for years, I was not paying attention to this because nobody pointed it out to me. Resilience work. There's the negative work of taking away all the bullshit that the cult put in you, but there's also building up your own resilience. And this is a term in psychology. Look this up.
Yeah.
You can spend time on it, and it's worth learning about. You're taking things away from you, so to speak, by deconstructing the cult stuff, but also build yourself back up at the same time. Don't just think that this is a process of emptying your vessel. It's it's living your life. It's living your best life. So build yourself back up again too.
Mm.
And then finally is the best way to go about doing that, of course, is live life.
Be
Don't
out in the world.
forget
Be
to live
exposed
life.
to real things.
Yeah, get out there, right?
Yes.
Get
Yeah.
out in the real world, do real world stuff, get out of your head. Cults love to put you in your head. That's where so much of people's time is spent, is in their head, sort of, this whole mental masturbation thing that goes on about all the woohoo, we're saving the world, we're changing society, all these things that
Navel-gazing.
we're not doing. We were never
Or
doing any of these things.
But see, I'm doing that. I'm sitting around transforming myself so as to transform the world endlessly, year after year after. But it's a lot of, it's
When are you
all
going to actually go do that stuff outside?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love to quote Michelle Obama, do something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very good.
In TM, in transcendental meditation, they will sit and they'll try to levitate doing their meditation. And they believe that by doing that, they will save the world. The highest levels of TM are whack. They're really something. And there's video you can look up of people hopping. They're in a cross-legged position, and they're just hopping up and down for hours, destroying their skeletal system, destroying their muscles,
It's a
hopping
literal
up
pain
and
in the
down.
ass.
Yeah, literally, right? People find doing this. People will do the most amazing things in the service of themselves and this world, thinking they're doing good and struggling for years trying to figure out why what they thought was so good is so bad. They were never the problem, and their intentions were never the problem. It was the direction they were put in that made them into weapons. And that's what you're undoing in this whole thing. So So probably one of the most important pieces of advice in this whole thing is get out of your head. Get out in the
Nice.
world, meet and greet
Be with real people.
and intermix
Yeah.
and have a variety of experiences, and it will shed so much of the cult bullshit just kind of on its own.
Oh,
Perfect.
that's beautiful.
Such a great way to end the conversation. And again, Chris, we're so grateful for you being with us today. As you know, people, Chris, you make yourself available as a resource. We know that people can find you. Your website is
mncriticalthinking.com.
right, mncriticalthinking.com. We will have it in the show notes, so you can easily find Chris as well as you can find Anne.
And your podcast is, what's it called? Speaking of cults. Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of cults.
Yeah. ... And you do very, very
Don't
frequent
get thrown off when the
shows.
logo says sensibly speaking, which I also love that sentence, by
It
the
used
way.
to be called sensibly speaking. Sorry about that, guys. I'm
sorry,
still
I still love that. I'm like,
brands
oh my gosh,
evolve,
every time I
right?
see it.
Yeah. People know what they
That's
know.
right.
They recognize
All right,
you when they
thanks,
see you.
guys.
Yeah. Thanks again. And until next time, I'm Mark Tapoya with Ann L. Peterson, and this has been Confronting the Line.